Hey everybody, Sean from Northkin Gaming. How are y'all doing tonight? It's Wednesday, January 22nd, and today we're kicking off the first of a three-part series that's going to look at Frostgrave, which is what I refer to as an open mini system, and how you can tailor your own board, minis, and experience based on your own budget. So today we're going to be looking at minis. So basically, why I'm tackling this is because what I find really interesting about this is that it's the first gaming system that allows the player to dictate how they want to play the game. I think this is fascinating because it allows you to decide how you want your band to look. So just a quick overview: Frostgrave is a skirmish style game, skirmish/adventure style game, where multiple players pit their own war bands against other people's war bands in a quest for treasure, glory, killing monsters, that sort of thing. Kind of like a little group of D&D adventurers on a quest to get the gold, get the artifact, beat the monster, that kind of thing. So what I like about it is, as I mentioned, it's a system that allows the player to decide what models they want to use. So Frostgrave was put out by Osprey Games back in 2015, and with the game they came out with their own set of minis, but in the first couple of chapters of the book it specifically says that while they do have their own line of minis, players are free to use whatever minis they want as long as they sustain a consistent scale for all the players. Of course, this is to make sure that all the rule sets are balanced and that you don't have terrain imbalance and you don't have weird dynamics on the tabletop. But what this does for the player is it opens up all kinds of options for what models you want to use, and it can go from the high end, high budget. I've got $1,000 I want to spend to make this game really fun and really aesthetically pleasing, to the university student who might have $50 to their name. So this series, we'll look at this in three parts. So the first one's going to be the miniatures. Second one is going to be the tabletop itself, and the third one will be terrain pieces. So let's talk a little bit about minis then. So it's kind of hard to talk about something like this without coming up with Games Workshop as an option. And really, they've been in the game for what, 40 plus years now. They've been putting out high quality models since they first went into business. And of course, they haven't gotten, all they've done is gotten better over the years. So their pieces are magnificent. All you have to do is go into a Games Workshop store and look at the pieces that they have on their demo tables, and to take in their majesty is just it's a sight to behold, right? Of course, those minis come with a certain price point. With Games Workshop, a lot of their stuff doesn't come in single models. It comes in boxes where you have anywhere from 5 to 20 models in a box, and those boxes will go anywhere from $35 to upwards of $120, depending on what you're looking at getting. They do have solo pieces, but those solo pieces are meant to be more centerpiece models that have a larger impact on a battlefield overall, and those single pieces can go from anywhere from $40 to $80. So if your budget's not necessarily small and you want something that looks really epic, you could go with the Games Workshop line. Of course, I'll give you examples of what these look like towards the end of the video as well, just so you have an idea as to what I'm referring to and what you could do with some of these options. So, and yeah, with Games Workshop, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. You take one look at these models and they're sharp, they're robust, they're heroic. I mean, these are the models that you would expect to be leading the charge of an epic scale battle. So to see something like that on a Frostgrave table would almost, it's fitting. It's very fitting, right? But again, cost is the problem. So I would put that on the high-end scale of miniatures that you might consider using for Frostgrave. And again, if budget's not your concern, then that would definitely be something to consider. But let's talk about mid-range. So with mid-range, mid-range is kind of what I refer to as your sort of catch-all. So there's a lot of companies out there that make miniatures, and a lot of them are, I haven't seen a miniatures company that puts out a for lack of a better term, a crappy model. I mean, yeah, you get sculpts that kind of make you giggle and titter and make you roll your eyes, but overall, their overall production is usually not too bad. So when you start looking at mid-range, these are things like your Reaper minis, Word miniatures, Privateer Press. If you wanted to go with more historical content, you could go with Warlord Games or some of Osprey's other material. And these are usually pretty good. They have a fair amount of detail for what they're trying to convey. The facial details look fairly sharp. Like, they get away with being really, really good looking models. They're not at the Games Workshop level of epicness and glory, but they certainly carry their own sort of. They do carry a sense of gravitas behind each of their models that shows a character or a persona. And they've done a very good job of capturing a particular intensity based on the pose of a model. So those are really, really good options. And usually those models, if you're looking at solos, they're far more affordable. Reaper Minis will run anywhere from $6 to $12 a model for a humanoid size model with a 28 millimeter base. Same with Privateer Press. Privateer Press might go a little bit higher because they have some bigger models that obviously, production costs, material costs for a larger model means the model's going to be a bit pricier. But again, you kind of get with all of these, you're going to get what you pay for. But with Privateer Press, there's a little more detail as well, and so you might pay a little bit on a higher end for some of those more elaborate sculpts. But for the most part, you're probably not going to find yourself spending more than $20 for a single model. Okay. And this is kind of where the magic is for me. I mean, if you've got money, you can make anything look grand. But if you're sitting on a budget and you've got to make things look, as decent as you can with enough money to buy a family-sized KFC meal, then you kind of need to stretch your creative limits a little bit. And what I think is really good for achieving that end is actually the line of models from WizKids. So I believe WizKids does both of these lines. So there's a Pathfinder line, and then there's a line for Dungeons and Dragons, which is referred to as Nolzur's Magnificent Minis. All of these minis I'm going to showcase towards the end of the video, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail. But Nolzur's Magnificent Minis, they're not made of a hard metal, or they're not made of the pewter that you find in classic miniatures that have weight, nor do they have a big robust presence like you would see in some of the Games Workshop stuff. But their poses and their detail are surprisingly well captured and sustained in these models. These models are very inexpensive. Depending on where you go, you can get them from anywhere along the lines of like $5.50 to like maybe $8 or $9. Here in Toronto, I think the best place to get them would be something like 401 Games or Meeple Mart, where you pay less than $6 for a mini. Now, what's really cool about the Nolzur's minis too is that you're not paying for a mini, you're paying for two minis. So when you go to pick these up, you buy based on a combination of race and class. So human warrior, elven wizard, drow ranger, dwarven barbarian, and some of them may be a little bit more specialized, and some of them are almost like mimics of well-known characters. So there's a human ranger. If you take a look at it, it's not hard to see that it's Minsk from Baldur's Gate. He's got a big great sword, and he's got a little giant miniature space hamster in his right hand. There's the vampire hunters. They look like they're trying to not quite be Von Leichten from Curse of Strahd. The Elven Ranger is clearly a Drist or knockoff. Saying knockoff isn't quite the right way to put it, but it's an elf with two curved swords. I mean, you can't really get away from assuming that that's a Drist clone, we'll say, for keeping a positive tone. But yeah, all these models are very inexpensive. They come pre-primed, which is also great because it means it takes one of the most, what I find to be annoying steps out of painting a miniature. And you know, they take paint fairly well. I mean, the primer, we're not talking about like a high-end primer. It's if you kind of fudge around with the paint and you start being, you know, abrasive with it, it comes off very easily. But if you're just laying on some quick brush coats to give it some color, you know, it does a great job. The detail in the mini itself is, for something that costs less than $6, is actually quite surprising. They have some larger base models as well, like a series of giants that came out with Storm King's Thunder, which was a Dungeons and Dragons supplement that came out, I think it was in 2013 or 14. And they also came out with a series of dragons, which came out with Tyranny of Dragons campaign. They didn't come out. Then they've also got some terrain pieces, which I thought was brilliant too. So for Dragon Heist and Dungeon of the Mad Mage, rather than come out with large-scale minis, because there wasn't really a large monster presence in those two games, they actually gave you a series of models that could be used for a backdrop. So for example, for Dungeon of the Mad Mage, they gave you Hallister's library. So they gave you a couple of bookshelves. They gave you like a little orrery that sits in the middle of a room, a couple of candle posts, and a few other artifacts that you would expect to find in the library of a demented, maniacal mage. For Dragon Heist, there's and I can't remember the actual name of it in the game, but it's like a city graveyard. They give you a kit that allows you to build that graveyard. It gives you a couple of stone walls, a nice iron grate, a statue with a little pool at the bottom of it, and those kits usually run, those are the more expensive components from those sets. They usually run about $50 or $60, but you get quite a bit out of them. So, so yeah, let's take a few moments. Let's actually have a look at some of these minis, and ultimately what I want to boil down to is that the reason why you want to maybe consider some of these different options is because if you are a college student or if you are on a budget, you know, you're not restricted from getting involved in the miniature hobby. And I think it's a fascinating way for people to be able to jump in and get multiple uses out of the same models. So let's take a moment. Let's have a look. Okay, so in taking a look at some of the model options that you could consider, if you were to look at, say, Games Workshop, if you wanted to spend a few dollars and really amp out what your warband would look like, you would end up having models that would look kind of like this. So this is a Stormcast, I think he's called an Extoller. So it's a combination spellcaster warrior. As you can see, there's just an astounding amount of detail here in the runes around the neck of the breastplate, the breastplate itself, the banner on the banner details on the staff. Look at all the details on the kilt for the skirt there. And just as you get a look around, this thing is just chock full of detail. So I mean, who wouldn't want something like this on a battlefield? This just screams heroism, and this screams adventure. It's just a beautiful looking model. The upshot to this, though, is that this particular model, at the time that I was reviewing it, was only available in the Soul Wars starter kit for Age of Sigmar 2nd edition. So if you wanted to get this model, unfortunately, you would be looking at spending almost $200. Now, granted, that comes with 2 full armies. So if everything you wanted was included in that box, you might consider that. But even still, that's a fairly hefty price to pay, even at a discounted rate on a box set. That's still pretty. It's still a pretty tall ask for a mini, right? So, but let's say you want to scale down a little bit. Let's say you want to look at what I would refer to as the mid-range. Then you'd be looking at things like Reaper Minis, Privateer Press, Word Games, stuff like that. So for example, this is a model from Reaper. This is a model I picked up several years ago, actually. So I think I've had this one for, oh, I don't know, about 8 or 9 years. And I gave her like a very quick brush up paint job. Nothing too fancy. If I could just get the zoom to work properly on this thing. There we go. So you can see there's still quite a bit of detail in here. You know, her face is very, very clearly feminine. She's got a little crown on her head. The hair detail is still fairly well put together. And if you look at the clothing and the attire that she comes with. Now, she also came with a rapier that hung on her belt, but I didn't like the way that it looked, so I just kind of kept her without. She's got the big spell book. So she looks very much like a Renaissance-esque sort of female spellcaster. She doesn't look too bad, and that model was $8. So I mean, definitely something to consider. And I've stuck her on a 30 mil base, which is from Privateer Press. So another one from Privateer would be this is Ketlin Finch. She's actually a Warcaster attachment. You have to apologize, or you have to forgive me for my paint job. It was kind of a rush paint job on these ones because they were for a tournament. But again, on a 30 mil base, you can see all the detail in the power couplers on her back. The detail on the staff is quite nice. If I actually had at the time that I painted this, if I had a better skill set of painting capability, she wouldn't look like a melty-faced model. But overall, it's not too bad. And again, a little more of the same if we look at Savio Montero Acosta, also from Privateer Press. Overall, you've got a lot of detail. Look at that shoulder pauldron with the Cygnus on the side, the cape on the back, the detail on the storm blades is really nice. Look at all the armor detail. All of these, like this line, would definitely go well as a mid-range if you wanted to use them for a Frostgrave game. Like Savio Montero Acosta is a $15 model last I checked. 15 or 18, something like that. So it's not too bad for mid-range. You get a couple of these and you got yourself, a pretty respectable warband. Now, let's say you're a college student, you're on a budget, and this is kind of where it gets a little creative and potentially tricky. So I had mentioned Nolzur's Magnificent Minis. This is kind of my go-to for my D&D campaign because I think they do look really cool. Again, the detail is a little more lacking, but for what you pay for them, they're actually really good. So here is their unpainted Elven Sorceress. So you can see it's got, it still has a fair amount of detail on it. This is obviously, as you can see, it's an unpainted model. I'll show you a painted one shortly. But she's still got a lot of detail on her. You look at the boots, the rivets are very clean. The design on the skirting of her belt's really well put together. The cape, there's not much to it, but it's it still looks pretty good with the what's that term? The hemming on the bottom of the cape. Her hair looks pretty decent, and the ears coming out from underneath the hair is a nice touch, and her facial characteristics are respectable. I mean, this is a very cheap model. I mean, you can look at that, look how it flexes in place, right? It's not strong, but it captures a very good likeness. And yeah, this is the merchantman that I picked up too. Look at the mustaches on his face. Look at his robust belly and the buckles on his shirt and the frills on his vest. The frills on the shirt. The chest has a lot of nice detail on it. His boots are very well put together. This is a $5 model. And then this one here is a painted model that was done up by my friend Keith, who I'm sure you'll meet soon enough. When you apply a bit of paint to it, you can really bring these guys to life. So this is a character that he painted up, which where he painted up for our D&D campaign, which I kind of stole for for my Paladin as we're currently running Curse of Strahd. But, you know, a couple of layers of paint in the right places, and these guys look really good. And, you know, for, you know, $30 to $40, you can build an entire band out of these. So whereas with Privateer Press or with Games Workshop, by the time you finished outfitting your band, you're definitely going to be looking at like close to, if not overshooting, a 3-digit cost point. So yeah. So I mean, when it comes to building your warband, if budget's a concern, I would definitely consider Nolzur's minis, or if you want to upscale it a little bit more and you want to get a little more strength and integrity. Let's say you're somebody that you know, has a bit of a slippery finger. You know, you might want to consider something like the Privateer Press or the Word Minis, because they're going to be made out of a stronger, more resilient material. So you know, they can survive a drop. They can weather a bit of a beating if you've got kids and they like to pry through your shelf when you're at work, or whatnot. You know, that's not a bad place to go. But yeah, all in all, depending on your style, your interest, in your budget, these open style games are a great opportunity for someone to get into the game and not have to worry about having to spend, you know, a small fortune just to get in.